The sun was barely peeking over the hills when Elijah Carter walked out onto his land. His boots pressed into the damp earth, leaving deep imprints that trailed toward the barn. His pride and joy, the structure he and his late father had built with their own hands more than 30 years ago. The wood, weathered and scarred by decades of storms, still stood tall, a living testament to hard work and perseverance. For Elijah, the barn was not just a storage place for tools, hay, and feed. It was a memory bank. Every board carried the echo of laughter, every nail carried a moment of struggle, and every corner reminded him of his father's voice. Son, this land is our legacy. Don't let anyone take it from you. But in recent years, things had changed. A sprawling gated community had sprung up just beyond Elijah's fences, a polished resort-style neighborhood run by a smug homeowners association that seemed to believe they controlled more than their own yards. To them, Elijah's barn was an eyesore, something that clashed with the pristine image they wanted for their community. It didn't matter that Elijah had been living there long before the first brick of their resort-style homes was ever laid. Elijah leaned against the barn door, sipping his morning coffee from an old enamel mug. The air was quiet except for the distant hum of lawnmowers and leaf blowers coming from the manicured lawns across the lake. He could already feel their eyes on him. Some of the HOA board members jogged by in their designer sneakers, glancing over his way like he was a weed in their otherwise perfect garden. He had received letters, dozens of them, each one more threatening than the last. Remove the structure. Failure to comply will result in legal action. They claimed his barn violated their community aesthetic. He always scoffed at the words. Community aesthetic, Elijah muttered under his breath. My barn was here before their community even existed. That morning, he heard a sound that made his stomach drop, a heavy rumble of engines, the grinding squeal of machinery. Elijah turned and froze. Rolling onto his property were two trucks, one carrying men in reflective vests and the other pulling a bulldozer. Behind them, 3 HOA board members strutted like generals inspecting their troops. Elijah stormed forward, his hands balled into fists. What the hell is this? One of the board members, a tall man with slicked back hair and sunglasses perched on his nose, stepped forward. Mr. Carter, you've been warned. That structure is in violation of community codes. Today, it comes down. Elijah's jaw tightened. This is my land. That barn is mine. You don't have the right. Actually, another board member interrupted with a smug smile, holding up a stack of papers. We do. You ignored official notices. You had your chance to appeal. You didn't. So now we're exercising our authority. Authority. Elijah spat. You don't own me, and you sure as hell don't own this barn. But the bulldozer roared to life, and Elijah felt something snap inside him. He ran in front of the machine, planting himself firmly between it and the barn. The operator hesitated, glancing nervously at the board members. Move, or we'll have you arrested for obstruction, Slick Hair threatened. Elijah's chest heaved. His father's words echoed in his mind. But before he could speak, 2 police cruisers pulled up, sirens blaring. Out stepped officers who didn't even look Elijah in the eye. They grabbed his arms, forcing him aside as he shouted and struggled. This is my property. You can't do this. The officers pinned him against his own fence while the bulldozer advanced. Elijah could only watch as the machine tore into the barn's wooden walls. The splintering crack of wood echoed across the lake, each crash striking him in the chest like a hammer. The roof caved in, the doors snapped off their hinges, and in less than 30 minutes, his family's legacy was reduced to a pile of broken boards and dust. Neighbors from the resort community had gathered across the lake, sipping their morning coffee on their decks like it was some kind of show. Some even smiled, satisfied to see the old eyesore finally gone. Elijah's vision blurred with rage. When the last beam fell, Slick Hair adjusted his sunglasses and smirked. Now it looks better. This is progress, Mr. Carter. You should be thanking us. Elijah's lips trembled, but no words came out. He pulled free from the officers as they let him go and stumbled toward the wreckage. He knelt in the dust, running his calloused fingers over the broken boards. For a moment, he thought he could still smell the hay, still hear his father's laughter echoing inside those walls. Behind him, the HOA board walked away without a shred of remorse, already talking about how much the property value of their community would improve now that the barn was gone. But what they didn't know, what they could never understand, was that Elijah wasn't powerless. While they had taken his barn, they had overlooked something far more valuable. Something only he controlled. Just beyond the barn, down a dirt path hidden by thick brush, stood the old dam. It wasn't much to look at, just a concrete valve and a steel wheel that controlled the flow of water from the spring-fed stream into the resort's artificial lake. That lake was their crown jewel, the centerpiece of their community. Without it, their homes were just overpriced boxes in the middle of nowhere. And the dam, it sat on Elijah's land. It was his. His father had built it with the same hands that had built the barn. As Elijah stood up from the rubble, his rage hardened into resolve. He wiped the dust from his hands and stared across the shimmering water at the expensive houses and manicured lawns. They thought they had humiliated him, broken him. But what they had done was awaken something dangerous inside him. Elijah turned slowly toward the hidden path, his boots crunching on the gravel. His heart pounded with a new rhythm, not of sorrow, but of vengeance. The HOA thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming. Elijah's hands gripped the cool steel of the old valve wheel as twilight settled over his land. The barn's wreckage still lay behind him like a fresh wound, but he refused to look back. His eyes were fixed on the dam, the silent guardian of the lake that glittered across from the luxury homes. For decades, he had maintained it, ensuring the water flowed just right, preventing floods in the spring and drought in the summer. Nobody in the HOA knew the delicate balance he alone managed. To them, the lake was a given, a decorative centerpiece for their barbecues and weekend boat rides. To Elijah, it was leverage. He crouched down, running his hand over the corroded bolts, the iron cold under his calloused palm. His father's voice seemed to whisper in the wind, "This land answers to you, son. Not to them." Elijah drew in a long breath. His grief twisted into something sharp, something that steadied him instead of breaking him. They had bulldozed not just a barn, but the last piece of his family. And now, they were about to learn what it meant to provoke a man with nothing left to lose. He turned the wheel slowly. At first, it resisted, the metal groaning in protest. Then, with a screech that echoed across the valley, the valve loosened, and the water that once fed the lake began to rush down into the creek below. A torrent surged out, frothing and hissing as it snaked its way toward the woods. Elijah watched as the lake's smooth surface began to ripple unnaturally, the waterline retreating inch by inch. By morning, it was impossible to ignore. Residents gathered on their pristine decks, coffee mugs in hand, frowning as they noticed the shoreline creeping inward. The water that once lapped at their manicured lawns was shrinking away, exposing mud and rocks. Children who had played with inflatable rafts stared at the shrinking waterline in confusion. Some thought it was a fluke, maybe a seasonal shift. But by noon, panic had begun to set in. The HOA called an emergency meeting at the clubhouse, a glass-walled structure overlooking what had once been a sparkling lake. Now, the water was visibly pulling back, the docks hanging awkwardly in midair. Residents crowded the room, their voices sharp with frustration. "This is unacceptable," shouted one man in a golf shirt. "I paid extra for a lakefront property. My kids swim there every summer. What's going on?" A woman demanded. Slick hair, the HOA president, adjusted his tie nervously. "We're looking into it. There must be a leak in the system. Possibly erosion. We'll have our engineers investigate." But there were no engineers. The HOA had always assumed the dam and water flow were someone else's problem, something handled by the county or nature itself. None of them realized Elijah Carter held the key. That night, Elijah sat on the porch of his farmhouse, watching the lake continue to shrink. The sound of frogs and crickets grew louder as the water receded, the ecosystem already shifting. His phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. He let it ring. He knew who it was. The next day, they came in person. 3 board members marched across his land, their polished loafers caked with dirt. They didn't bother to knock. Just barged onto his porch where he sat rocking in his chair. "What the hell are you doing, Carter?" Slick hair barked. "The lake is draining. Our property values are tanking. Fix it." Elijah didn't move, didn't blink. He sipped from his mug, letting the silence stretch until it cut into them. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and steady. "You tore down my barn. You destroyed my family's legacy. That lake, it lives because of me. And now it dies because of you. You can't. One of them sputtered, his face red. Oh, I can, Elijah interrupted, leaning forward. That dam is on my land. My father built it. I've maintained it all these years without asking for a dime. You never cared. You never even asked. But you cared enough to destroy what was mine. So now, I don't give a damn about yours. They exchanged panicked glances. We'll take you to court. We'll sue. Elijah chuckled darkly. Go ahead. By the time you crawl through the courts, your lake will be a mud pit and your $1 million homes will be worth less than the lumber they're built from. The board members stormed off, but their outrage couldn't mask their fear. For the first time, the power wasn't in their hands, it was in his. Over the next week, the lake withered. Docks stood like broken teeth over cracked earth. Boats lay stranded in the mud. The once pristine water turned into shallow pools swarming with mosquitoes. The HOA scrambled, bringing in contractors to try and refill the lake with pumps, but it was like trying to plug a hole in a sinking ship. The valve Elijah had opened gushed relentlessly, bleeding the lake dry. The media caught wind of the disaster. Local reporters came with cameras, filming the environmental catastrophe in the upscale neighborhood. Homeowners shouted about ruined investments, children cried about losing their summer playground, and the HOA board hid behind half-hearted statements. When one reporter approached Elijah's porch, asking for a comment, he simply looked into the camera, his weathered face calm but unyielding. They destroyed my barn. They destroyed my history. I'm just letting nature take back what's hers. The clip went viral. People across the state, farmers, working-class families, anyone who had ever felt trampled by the wealthy and powerful, cheered him on. Barn Man, as they nicknamed him online, became a symbol of resistance. But the HOA wasn't done. One night, two men tried sneaking onto Elijah's land with tools, hoping to shut the valve. Elijah was waiting. The click of his shotgun echoed through the dark as he stepped out from the shadows. Private property, he growled. The men froze, hands raised, before retreating into the night. Word spread quickly. Nobody dared try again. By the second week, the lake was gone. All that remained was cracked mud and rotting fish. The resort community, once a jewel of the region, had become a ghostly wasteland. Property values plummeted, residents moved out, and the HOA dissolved in disgrace. Elijah stood on the dam, staring out at the emptiness. For the first time since the bulldozers came, he felt something like peace. His barn was gone, but so was their arrogance. They had thought him powerless. They had thought their wealth and connections made them untouchable. But the land had always answered to him. And now, everyone knew it.